The emergency board meeting at Nextech Industries was supposed to be Elena Chen's moment to prove she could handle the tech giant her father had built from nothing. 6 months after inheriting the CEO position following James Chen's tragic death in a private plane crash, she had successfully launched their new AI-powered social media platform and secured partnerships with 3 major governments for data analytics services. Instead, she found herself staring across the glass conference table at FBI agent Sarah Kim, watching 15 years of Silicon Valley dominance crumble in real time. "Miss Chen," Agent Kim said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent years prosecuting tech executives, "our investigation into Nextech Industries has uncovered evidence of systematic privacy violations affecting over 2 billion users worldwide." Elena's fingers remained steady as she closed the encrypted tablet, containing screenshots of personal messages, location data, and intimate photos that Nextech had allegedly sold to authoritarian governments for surveillance purposes. The evidence felt surreal. Her father had always insisted that user privacy was sacred, that Nextech existed to democratize technology, not weaponize it. "Elena, there are things about this company you're not ready to understand. Things that would break your heart. Dad, I'm 30 years old and have 2 computer science degrees from MIT. Stop treating me like I'm still your little girl playing with circuit boards. Some knowledge isn't about intelligence, sweetheart. It's about survival. And some survival requires sacrifices I pray you'll never have to make." Those had been among their final words before the Gulf Stream went down over the Pacific, taking James Chen and all his secrets with him. "These allegations require comprehensive investigation," Elena replied, her voice carrying the controlled precision she'd learned from watching her father navigate congressional hearings. "Nextech has always maintained the highest standards for user privacy and data protection." Agent Kim's expression remained skeptical, including the Myanmar operation, where Nextech's facial recognition data was used to identify and arrest pro-democracy activists. The words hit Elena like a physical assault. She'd approved the Myanmar government contract herself, believing it was for infrastructure development and educational technology. The idea that her company's AI had been used to hunt down political dissidents made her feel physically sick. "I'll need to review our compliance protocols," she said carefully, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Of course, we'll be conducting a comprehensive audit of your data centers and user databases, starting Monday morning. In the meantime," every screen in the room went black simultaneously. Emergency power kicked in immediately, but the sophisticated display systems that normally showed real-time global user statistics, stock prices, and system performance metrics remained dark. The gentle hum of servers and cooling systems died, replaced by an ominous silence that every tech executive dreaded. "What the hell?" muttered Charles Chen, Elena's uncle and the company's chief technology officer. His face had gone pale in the emergency lighting. "This isn't possible. Our systems have triple redundancy." Elena's mind raced through catastrophic scenarios. The major system breach during an FBI investigation would look like evidence destruction or gross incompetence. Either interpretation would destroy Nextech's credibility with regulators, users, and shareholders. "Security report status." She spoke into her emergency communicator. "Ma'am, we're showing massive intrusion across all primary servers. This isn't hardware failure. Someone's actively attacking our core infrastructure. Our cybersecurity team estimates 12 to 15 hours to identify the breach points and restore secure operations. 15 hours. The FBI would assume Nextech was destroying evidence. Stock prices would collapse. User trust would evaporate overnight. Ma'am," a voice came from the conference room doorway. Elena turned to see a man in the dark slacks and button-down shirt that marked him as one of their cybersecurity specialists, tablet in hand, looking remarkably calm while chaos erupted around them. She recognized him. Miguel Santos, senior cybersecurity analyst. She'd seen him occasionally during late-night security briefings, usually providing technical assessments with quiet competence. What surprised her was his presence on the executive floor during a crisis, and his apparent composure while everyone else panicked. "The elevators are locked down for security," she said. "How did you access this floor?" Emergency protocols grant cybersecurity personnel building-wide access during active breaches, he replied. His voice carried a subtle accent, Spanish, she thought, but with undertones of something else. Military precision, perhaps. I was monitoring the intrusion remotely when the attack escalated. Thought you might need a real-time assessment. Agent Kim stepped forward, her law enforcement instincts clearly activated. And you are Miguel Santos, senior cybersecurity analyst, he said, extending a hand that the FBI agent shook cautiously. Elena noticed the steadiness of his grip, the way he maintained direct eye contact, without the nervous deference most employees showed around federal investigators. More intriguing was his equipment. The tablet he carried showed detailed network architectures and real-time attack vectors that should have been impossible to access during a system-wide breach. "What's your assessment?" Elena asked, studying his face in the emergency lighting. Miguel's fingers moved across his tablet with practiced expertise, pulling up diagnostics that painted a terrifying picture of coordinated digital warfare. "This isn't random hacktivism," he said, his tone carrying the gravity of someone who understood the implications. "We're looking at state-level intrusion capabilities, multiple attack vectors, advanced persistent threats, zero-day exploits we've never seen before." Charles moved closer, his usual corporate authority replaced by technical anxiety. "How long to neutralize the threat?" Miguel paused, his dark eyes finding Elena's across the room. In the red emergency lighting, his expression was difficult to read, but she sensed careful calculation behind his next words. Standard incident response would require bringing in federal cybersecurity contractors, complete system isolation, and forensic analysis of every compromised component. "You're looking at weeks to fully restore trust in your infrastructure." The board members exchanged panicked glances. Elena felt the weight of their doubt, their concern about her leadership during the company's greatest crisis, their growing fear that Nextech might not survive a combined FBI investigation and massive security breach. "However," Miguel continued, "there's an alternative approach." Elena leaned forward. "Explain." "I can trace the intrusion in real time and implement active countermeasures while maintaining system integrity. It's dangerous. If we make the wrong move, we could lose everything. But if successful, I can restore core operations within 2 hours while preserving evidence of the attack for federal investigators." Agent Kim looked skeptical. "Is that procedure standard?" "Nothing about this attack is standard," Miguel replied, "but I've dealt with similar threats during my time with military cybersecurity operations. Advanced persistent threats from nation-state actors require unconventional responses." Elena's eyebrows rose slightly. Military cybersecurity explained his composure under pressure, his familiarity with sophisticated attack patterns. But it raised questions about why someone with that background was working as a corporate security analyst instead of commanding premium consulting fees. Charles stood abruptly, his fear overriding business judgment. "This is insane. We should shut everything down and call the NSA." "Absolutely not," Elena said sharply. "Any extended downtime will be interpreted as evidence destruction." She turned to Miguel, making a decision based on instincts that had served her well in the brutal world of tech leadership. "You're certain you can neutralize the threat while preserving evidence?" "Yes, ma'am. But I'll need unrestricted access to all core systems and the authority to implement emergency protocols without approval chains." Elena felt the eyes of 12 board members watching her make a decision that could save or destroy the company her father had died protecting. "Do it." "Elena," Charles warned, if he makes a mistake, we'll handle the consequences. Mr. Santos, you have full authorization. "Whatever you need." As Miguel gathered additional equipment and headed toward the secure elevator that would take him to the primary data center, Elena found herself following him into the hallway. The emergency lighting cast everything in harsh shadows, and the absence of the usual electronic hum made every sound unnaturally loud. "Mr. Santos," she called softly. He turned, and in the dim light, she caught something in his expression that seemed strangely personal for someone she knew only through security briefings. "You don't have to do this," she said. "This level of risk, It goes far beyond your job description, doesn't it? He asked quietly. Nextech's technology affects billions of people worldwide. What happens to this company, to its data, to its users' privacy? The consequences reach far beyond Silicon Valley. There was weight behind his words, implications Elena couldn't quite grasp. But something about his tone suggested his concern went deeper than corporate loyalty or career advancement. Be careful, she said, surprised by the emotion in her voice. His smile was barely visible in the red-tinged darkness. I will, but Miss Chen, when this is over, there are things about Nextech you need to know. Things your father tried to tell you. Before Elena could respond, Miguel disappeared into the secure elevator, leaving her with more questions than answers. She returned to the conference room where Agent Kim was coordinating with FBI cybersecurity specialists, and Charles was alternating between pacing and making increasingly frantic calls to board members. Elena settled into her chair and tried to project confidence while her mind spun with implications of Miguel's final words. What had her father tried to tell her? What secrets about Nextech had died with him in that plane crash? 2 hours and 17 minutes after the attack began, every screen in the Nextech building blazed back to life simultaneously. Data flowed across monitoring displays, user statistics updated in real time, and the familiar hum of a fully operational tech empire filled the silence that had felt like death itself. The conference room erupted in relieved conversations, but Elena found herself watching the elevator, waiting for Miguel's return. When he finally appeared, his shirt wrinkled and stained with perspiration, she felt a surge of admiration mixed with growing suspicion. Core systems restored, he reported, his voice carrying the exhaustion of someone who just fought digital warfare. I've preserved complete logs of the intrusion for federal analysis and implemented additional security protocols to prevent similar attacks. Agent Kim looked genuinely impressed. Outstanding work, Mr. Santos. We'll need those logs immediately. Already prepared, Miguel said, producing an encrypted drive. But Agent Kim, there's something else you should see. The attack wasn't random. It was designed to destroy specific datasets. Someone was trying to eliminate evidence. Elena felt her blood chill. What kind of evidence? Miguel's eyes met hers across the room. Financial records, user data transfer logs, and communication archives dating back 7 years. Someone wanted to erase any trace of questionable business practices. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Elena realized that the cyber attack hadn't been an attempt to harm Nextech. It had been an attempt to protect someone by destroying evidence of their crimes. After Agent Kim and her team left with the encrypted evidence, Elena remained in the conference room with Charles, who looked more shaken than she'd ever seen him. We need to talk, Charles said quietly. About the company, about the investigation, about what your father really built here. What do you mean? Charles looked toward the windows that offered a panoramic view of Silicon Valley, where dozens of other tech companies were probably dealing with their own ethical compromises and regulatory challenges. James didn't build Nextech to democratize technology, Elena. He built it to survive in a world where information is the ultimate weapon. Sometimes that meant making deals with people who used that information in ways he never intended. Elena felt something cold settling in her stomach. You're talking about the government contracts. I'm talking about staying alive in an industry where companies that don't cooperate with certain interests tend to experience unfortunate accidents. The implication hit Elena like a physical blow. Her father's plane crash, which had never quite made sense from an engineering perspective, suddenly took on sinister new dimensions. You think Dad was murdered? Before Charles could answer, Elena's secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message from an unknown sender. Your cybersecurity specialist knows more about your father's death than he's telling you. If you want the truth, Brooklyn Bridge Park, tomorrow 6 p.m. Come alone. Elena stared at the message, her mind racing through implications she didn't want to consider. Miguel Santos had saved Nextech from complete destruction, but his final words suggested he knew secrets about her father that no corporate employee should possess. Charles, she said carefully, what do you know about Miguel Santos? Her uncle's face went pale. Why? Because I think our cybersecurity crisis just became something much more dangerous. As night fell over Silicon Valley, Elena Chen realized that the FBI investigation might be the least of her problems. The real threat lay in secrets buried with her father. Secrets that someone was now ready to expose through the one person she was beginning to trust. She had 24 hours to decide whether she was ready to learn the truth about James Chen, Nextech Industries, and the man who'd just saved them both. Meanwhile, in a small apartment in East Palo Alto, Miguel Santos sat before multiple monitors, typing an encrypted report to handlers who operated far outside government oversight. Across the room, a young woman with intelligent eyes looked up from her laptop, where news alerts showed her face on international wanted posters. "How much longer, Marcus?" Isabella Rivera asked, using his real name for the first time in months. "The Myanmar government has convinced 3 more countries to issue arrest warrants. I can't keep running forever." Miguel paused in his typing, looking at his sister with a mixture of love and determination. Isabella had been South America's most prominent investigative journalist until her exposé of government corruption, based on Nextech data, had made her a target for assassination. Soon, Bella. Elena Chen doesn't know what her company really does, what her father really built, but she's starting to ask the right questions. And if she chooses to protect the company instead of exposing the truth, Miguel looked at the surveillance photos of Elena Chen that covered one wall of his workspace. Images of a woman who'd inherited an empire of digital surveillance without realizing its true purpose. Then we'll have to make the choice for her. Isabella nodded and returned to her laptop, where she was writing what might be her final story, an exposé that would destroy Nextech Industries and reveal how Silicon Valley's biggest success story had become a tool for oppression worldwide. Miguel finished his report and encrypted it for transmission, knowing that tomorrow would begin the endgame he'd been planning for 18 months. Elena Chen would learn the truth about her father, her company, and the man she'd just trusted with her life. The only question was whether she would survive that knowledge. As Silicon Valley settled into another night of algorithmic dreams and digital nightmares, 2 people prepared for a confrontation that would either expose one of the tech industry's darkest secrets or destroy them both in the attempt. Brooklyn Bridge Park at sunset was a study in contrasts. Manhattan's gleaming tech towers reflected in the East River while families enjoyed the last warm evening of autumn. Elena Chen sat on a bench near the ferry terminal, watching commuters stream past, and tried to calm the anxiety that had been building since receiving the cryptic message about Miguel Santos. She'd spent the day conducting her own investigation into her cybersecurity specialist. What she'd found made no sense. His employment records showed 18 months at Nextech, exceptional performance reviews, security clearance approvals that should have taken years to obtain. But deeper investigation revealed gaps. Previous employment with a cybersecurity firm that had no online presence, references that led to disconnected numbers, a background that seemed carefully constructed rather than naturally developed. More disturbing were the financial records. Miguel Santos earned $180,000 annually as a senior analyst, yet his banking information showed no significant expenses, no mortgage, no car payments. Either he lived like a monk or someone else was funding his real life. "Miss Chen," she turned to find Miguel approaching, dressed in civilian clothes that made him look younger but somehow more dangerous. Without the corporate attire, she could see the precise way he moved, the constant alertness that spoke of training beyond computer security. "Mr. Santos," she replied, gesturing to the empty space beside her. "Thank you for coming." He sat down, maintaining careful distance between them. "You said you had questions about what I told you yesterday." I do." Elena studied his profile as he gazed out at the water. "You mentioned that there were things about Nextech I needed to know. Things my father tried to tell me. There are, but first I need to know something from you." Miguel turned to face her directly, and in the evening light, his eyes held an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "How much do you really know about your father's death?" Elena felt her chest tighten. "What do you mean, Dad died in a plane crash? Mechanical failure during a storm over the Pacific. The Gulfstream G650 that went down had been serviced 2 weeks before the flight. All systems were functioning perfectly when it took off from San Jose. The weather was clear until the aircraft suddenly went off radar. You're suggesting, Elena couldn't finish the sentence. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you that your father discovered something about Nextech that powerful people wanted buried with him. Elena stood abruptly, pacing to the railing that overlooked the water. Her rational mind rejected conspiracy theories, but her heart had never quite accepted the official explanation for her father's death. What could he have discovered that was worth killing for? Miguel was silent for a long moment, seeming to weigh his words carefully. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of a decision that would change everything between them. Your father found out that Nextech's AI algorithms weren't just analyzing user data for advertising. They were being used to identify and track political dissidents, journalists, and activists in over 30 countries. The words hit Elena like cold water. That's impossible. Our government contracts are for infrastructure and education. Elena, the use of her first name stopped her cold. I need to show you something, but once you see it, there's no going back. This will change how you see everything. Your company, your family, your own life. Elena looked at him, seeing not the cybersecurity analyst, but someone carrying secrets that weighed on him like physical burdens. Show me. Miguel pulled out a tablet. Not the corporate device he'd used during the crisis, but something that looked military-grade. His fingers moved across the screen, pulling up files that made Elena's world tilt on its axis. Financial records showing payments from authoritarian governments. User data profiles of journalists and activists who had subsequently disappeared or died. Email chains between Charles Chen and officials from Myanmar, Belarus, and Saudi Arabia discussing enhanced monitoring capabilities and problem individual identification. This is from your father's private server, Miguel said quietly. He'd been secretly documenting Nextech's government contracts for 2 years before he died. Elena sank back onto the bench, staring at evidence that her company, her inheritance, had been complicit in human rights violations worldwide. The Myanmar activist who was executed last month, Miguel continued, he was identified using Nextech's facial recognition algorithms. The Iranian journalist who disappeared, we tracked her through location data from our social media platform. The Brazilian environmental lawyer who was assassinated. Stop. Elena's voice was barely a whisper. Please, just stop. Miguel closed the tablet and waited while Elena processed the magnitude of what she'd learned. When she finally looked at him, her eyes were bright with tears. She refused to shed. You're not really Miguel Santos, are you? No, my name is Marcus Rivera. I'm a former NSA cybersecurity specialist, currently working with an organization called the Digital Freedom Coalition. Elena laughed bitterly. Of course. The man I trusted to save my company is working to destroy it. I'm working to expose the people who turned your father's dream into a tool for oppression. Marcus's voice carried passion that surprised her. Your father created Nextech to democratize information, to give people around the world access to knowledge and connection. Your uncle Charles corrupted that mission for profit. Elena felt a surge of defensive anger. Charles built Nextech alongside my father. He would never. Charles made the deals that kept Nextech profitable when your father wanted to refuse government contracts. Charles convinced your father that cooperation was survival. And when your father finally decided to expose what the company had become, Charles made sure he never got the chance. The implication hung in the air between them like a death sentence. Elena felt something break inside her chest. You're saying Charles killed my father. I'm saying Charles made a phone call to people who solve problems permanently. Marcus pulled out his real phone, showing her an encrypted message thread. Your father had scheduled a meeting with Washington Post journalists for the day after his plane went down. He was going to release everything. Elena stared at the evidence, feeling the last foundations of her world crumble. Not only had her company been used to harm innocent people, but her own uncle, the man who'd comforted her at her father's funeral, who'd guided her through taking over as CEO, had orchestrated her father's murder. Why are you telling me this? She asked quietly. Because 18 months ago, my sister Isabella was one of South America's most prominent investigative journalists. She was writing a story about government corruption in Colombia when someone used Nextech's data to track her movements. She barely escaped an assassination attempt, but now she's wanted by 3 governments and can't return to her real life. Marcus's voice carried pain that Elena recognized, the grief of someone who'd lost family to forces beyond their control. Isabella is the reason I volunteered for this assignment. The reason I've spent 18 months learning everything about NextX operations, gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment to expose what your company really does. And yesterday, saving us from the cyber attack, yesterday, I realized something I hadn't expected. Marcus met her eyes, and Elena saw vulnerability beneath his professional composure. I realized you didn't know. You're not the villain I thought you were, Elena. You're another victim of your uncle's ambition. Elena sat in silence, watching the ferry approach the terminal while trying to process betrayals that went deeper than she could have imagined. Her father murdered, her uncle a killer, her company a weapon against innocent people. And the man beside her, someone she was beginning to care about, had been lying to her from the moment they met. What happens now? She asked finally. That depends on you. Marcus opened the tablet again, showing her a different set of files. Your father called it Phoenix Protocol, a complete data dump of NextX illegal activities, designed to expose everything while protecting the company's legitimate users. Elena leaned closer, seeing her father's familiar coding style in the program architecture. He built this. He spent 2 years preparing it. Financial records, communication logs, user data transfer records, evidence of every illegal contract and human rights violation. Everything needed to hold the responsible parties accountable while preserving NextX technology for legitimate purposes. But he died before he could use it. Yes, but he gave me the activation codes. Elena's eyes widened. He gave you? When? How? 6 months before he died, your father received intelligence that his life was in danger. He reached out to the Digital Freedom Coalition through intermediaries, asking for help in exposing NextX crimes. I was assigned as his contact. Elena felt the world shift again. You knew my father. I met with him twice, once in a coffee shop in Redwood City, once in his private office after hours. He was brilliant, Elena, and heartbroken by what his company had become. He talked about you constantly, how proud he was of your technical abilities, how much he regretted that you would inherit his mistakes along with his achievements. Tears finally spilled down Elena's cheeks as she imagined her father, alone with terrible knowledge, trying to find a way to protect both his daughter and the victims of his company's crimes. He made me promise 2 things, Marcus continued softly. First, that I would make sure NextX crimes were exposed. Second, that I would give you the choice about how that exposure happened. Elena looked at him through her tears. What choice? You can walk away. Tonight, tomorrow, whenever you want. Take whatever money you can access and disappear. I'll activate Phoenix Protocol, the truth will come out, and you'll be safely distant from the consequences. Or you can help me. Use your access as CEO to gather additional evidence, help expose Charles and his network, work with us to transform NextX into something your father would be proud of. Elena wiped her eyes, trying to think clearly about an impossible decision. Walk away and let others clean up her family's mess, or stay and fight for justice while risking everything. If I help you, what happens to me? To the company? The FBI investigation will continue, but you'll be a cooperating witness instead of a defendant. NextX will face massive fines and restructuring, but the core technology can survive under new leadership. Charles and his network will face criminal charges, and if I don't help, Marcus's expression grew grim. Charles suspects that someone inside NextX is gathering evidence against him. If he figures out it's you, you'll end up like your father. Elena stood up, pacing to the railing again, as Manhattan's lights began to twinkle in the gathering darkness. The choice before her felt impossible: betray the family legacy to serve justice, or preserve that legacy while allowing terrible crimes to continue. Can I ask you something personal? She said without turning around. Of course. Yesterday, when you looked at me in that hallway, there was something in your expression, something that seemed real, not part of your cover identity. Marcus was quiet for so long that Elena turned to see his face. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I wasn't supposed to care about you, Elena. This was supposed to be a simple infiltration and evidence-gathering mission. But watching you these past months, seeing how you treat employees, how you've tried to make Nextech more ethical, without knowing how unethical it really was, I started hoping you were innocent. And now that you know I am, now I'm hoping you're also brave enough to help me make this right. Elena looked at him, really looked at him, seeing past the deception to the man who'd risked his life to save her company yesterday, who'd spent months gathering evidence to protect people like his sister, who was offering her a chance at redemption instead of revenge. I'll do it, she said quietly. I'll help you expose Charles and save Nextech. Marcus's relief was visible. Are you sure? Once we start down this path, my father died trying to do the right thing. I won't let his sacrifice be meaningless. Marcus nodded and pulled out a different device, making an encrypted call. Agent Kim, this is Marcus Rivera with Digital Freedom Coalition. I have Elena Chen with me, and she's ready to cooperate fully with the FBI investigation. As Marcus coordinated with federal investigators, Elena felt a strange sense of peace settling over her. For the first time since her father's death, she knew exactly what she needed to do. The question was whether they could gather enough evidence to bring down Charles Chen before he realized his niece had become his greatest threat. 2 hours later, Elena sat in her father's former office, still hers, but now feeling like borrowed space, staring at her computer screen and preparing to betray the only family she had left. Marcus sat across from her, monitoring building security while she accessed files that could send her uncle to prison for life. Charles has a private server, she said, her fingers moving across the keyboard with practiced precision. Financial records, communication logs, meeting notes, everything goes through his personal system. Can you access it? I have administrative privileges, but Elena paused, her cursor hovering over the security protocols. Once I do this, there's no going back. Charles will know someone accessed his files. Then we better make it count. Elena took a deep breath and entered her access codes. Charles Chen's private files opened before them like a roadmap of corporate corruption, revealing the true scope of Nextech's transformation into a global surveillance apparatus. Government contracts worth billions of dollars, user data sales to authoritarian regimes, communication logs detailing the planning of her father's assassination, financial transfers that funded political oppression across 3 continents. My God, Elena breathed, reading an email chain about using Nextech's algorithms to identify LGBTQ+ individuals in countries where their existence was illegal. How many people have died because of what we built? Too many, Marcus said grimly. But now we can stop it. As they downloaded evidence that would destroy Charles Chen and expose Nextech's crimes, Elena realized she was finally fulfilling her father's last wish, not to preserve his empire, but to preserve his integrity. Outside her office windows, Silicon Valley glittered with the dreams of thousands of entrepreneurs and engineers, most of whom believed they were building a better world through technology. Elena Chen was about to prove that sometimes the most important thing you can build is justice, even when it costs you everything you thought you wanted. The Nextech Industries boardroom had never felt more like a trap to Elena as she sat at the head of the glass conference table, watching her uncle Charles command the room with the authority of someone who believed himself untouchable. Around them, the other 11 board members listened with rapt attention as Charles outlined his crisis management strategy for handling the FBI investigation. The federal probe is clearly politically motivated, Charles declared, his voice carrying the conviction that had helped build Nextech into a $100 billion empire. They have no concrete evidence of wrongdoing, only circumstantial correlations and activist speculation about our government partnerships. Elena kept her expression neutral as her uncle lied with practiced ease to people who trusted him implicitly. Hidden in her briefcase sat encrypted drives containing every piece of evidence Marcus had helped her gather over the past week. Financial records detailing illegal data sales, communication logs, planning her father's murder, and user profiles of journalists and activists who had subsequently disappeared. The weight of that evidence felt like carrying her father's ghost, demanding justice for both his death and the victims of the company he'd tried to expose. Our legal team has prepared a comprehensive response strategy, Charles continued, clicking through a presentation that painted Nextech as a victim of government overreach. We'll challenge the investigation's scope, question their evidence collection methods, and demonstrate that our international partnerships have always complied with applicable laws. Board member Patricia Reeves raised her hand. Charles, what about the reports linking our facial recognition technology to human rights violations in Myanmar? Unsubstantiated claims from biased news sources. Charles replied smoothly, our technology is neutral. If governments misuse it, that's beyond our control or responsibility. Elena felt sick listening to her uncle dismiss the murder of pro-democracy activists as misuse of technology, but she forced herself to remain silent. Marcus had been clear about the timing. They needed Charles to reveal more about his network before moving against him. What concerns me, said board member David Kim, is yesterday's cyber attack. If our security can be compromised so easily, actually, Charles interrupted, his expression darkening. Our investigation into that incident has raised some troubling questions. The attack was neutralized by Miguel Santos, a cybersecurity analyst whose background appears to have some irregularities. Elena's pulse quickened, but she kept her face impassive. What kind of irregularities? His previous employer doesn't seem to exist in any meaningful way. His references are untraceable, and his technical capabilities far exceed what we'd expect from someone with his stated experience level. Charles's eyes found Elena's across the table. I'm beginning to wonder if Mr. Santos is who he claims to be. He saved our company, Elena said carefully. Without his intervention, we would have lost everything. Or he staged the entire crisis to demonstrate his value and gain our trust. Charles clicked to a new slide showing digital forensics data. I've had our security team conduct a deeper analysis of yesterday's attack. The intrusion patterns are consistent with someone who had intimate knowledge of our systems. Elena realized with growing dread that Charles was building a case against Marcus, using the very crisis intervention that had saved Nextech as evidence of betrayal. Furthermore, Charles continued, I've discovered that Mr. Santos has been accessing files well beyond his security clearance. Financial records, executive communications, even my personal files. The boardroom fell silent. Elena felt trapped between her cover story and her growing fear for Marcus's safety. Perhaps we should bring Mr. Santos in for questioning, suggested board member Jennifer Walsh. Already done, Charles said with satisfaction. Security is escorting him to conference room B as we speak. Elena's blood turned to ice. If Charles questioned Marcus directly, their entire operation would be exposed. Worse, if her uncle suspected Marcus was gathering evidence about the murders, Marcus might not survive the interrogation. I think we should, Elena began. Her secure phone vibrated with an emergency message. Charles knows. Building lockdown in progress. Get out now. Elena stared at the message, realizing that their carefully planned investigation had just become a race for survival. Elena? Charles was watching her with sudden intensity. Is everything all right? Of course. I was just thinking about our response to the media. Elena stood carefully, trying to project calm while her mind raced through escape scenarios. I should coordinate with our PR team before any official statements. Actually, I think you should stay, Charles said, his voice taking on a tone Elena had never heard before. Cold, calculating, dangerous. We need to discuss your relationship with Mr. Santos. Elena felt the room's atmosphere shift as the other board members sensed the tension between uncle and niece. She realized with growing horror that Charles wasn't just suspicious of Marcus, he was suspicious of her. I don't know what you mean. Don't you? Charles clicked to another slide, this one showing security footage of Elena and Marcus talking in the hallway after the power restoration. You seem quite comfortable with our mysterious cybersecurity specialist, almost as if you've been working together. Elena's mouth went dry. Charles, that's ridiculous. I barely know the man. Then you won't mind if I share what our investigation has revealed about his real identity. Charles's smile was predatory. Miguel Santos doesn't exist, Elena. The man we know by that name is actually Marcus Rivera, a former NSA operative currently working with an organization dedicated to exposing what they call corporate surveillance crimes. The boardroom erupted in shocked murmurs. Elena felt the walls closing in around her as Charles continued his revelation. More interesting is what Mr. Rivera has been doing during his 18 months at Nextech. He's been systematically gathering evidence about our government partnerships, our data analytics operations, and, Charles paused dramatically, our family's personal business practices. Elena realized that Charles was using the board meeting as theater, publicly exposing Marcus while simultaneously testing her loyalty. Every response she made would either prove her innocence or confirm her guilt. If this is true, she said carefully, then we need to involve law enforcement immediately. Oh, I have. FBI agent Sarah Kim is en route with a team to arrest Mr. Rivera for corporate espionage, unauthorized access to classified systems, and conspiracy to commit industrial sabotage. Elena felt her chest tighten. Agent Kim was their ally, but Charles didn't know that. He was setting up Marcus to be arrested by the very people they were cooperating with, creating a situation where the FBI would have to choose between protecting their operation and maintaining Charles's trust. Her phone buzzed again. Phoenix Protocol activated. Evidence uploading to secure servers. Whatever happens, the truth will come out. Elena stared at the message, realizing that Marcus had made the ultimate sacrifice. By activating her father's data dump, he was ensuring that Nextech's crimes would be exposed even if he didn't survive Charles's retaliation. Elena, Charles said softly, there's something else we need to discuss. Something about your father. The room fell completely silent. Elena looked up to find her uncle watching her with an expression she couldn't read. What about Dad? James didn't die in an accident, Elena. He was murdered. By people who discovered he was planning to betray everything we'd built together. Elena's vision blurred as Charles confirmed what she'd already learned from Marcus, but hearing it spoken aloud by her father's killer felt like being stabbed in the heart. That's impossible, she managed. Your father lost his nerve, Elena. After 15 years of building Nextech into a global powerhouse, he suddenly developed a conscience. He was going to destroy everything. The company, our partnerships, thousands of jobs, all to satisfy some naive notion about user privacy. Charles began pacing around the conference table, and Elena realized he was confessing to her father's murder in front of 11 witnesses. Either he was completely confident in his control over the situation, or he had no intention of letting anyone leave this room alive. I tried to reason with him. I offered compromises, alternative approaches, ways to address his concerns without destroying what we'd built. But James was determined to burn it all down. So you killed him, Elena said quietly. I made a phone call to people who understand that sometimes individual conscience must yield to collective necessity. Charles stopped pacing and faced her directly. Just as I'm prepared to make another phone call if his daughter proves as troublesome as her father. The threat hung in the air like a physical presence. Elena realized that Charles wasn't just confessing, he was offering her a choice between cooperation and death. But as she looked around the boardroom at 11 other people who'd just heard Charles admit to murder, Elena realized something important. Her uncle had made a fatal miscalculation. You're right about one thing, Charles, she said, standing slowly and pulling out her phone. Dad did lose his nerve, but not about exposing Nextech's crimes. He lost his nerve about trusting you. Elena held up her phone, showing that she'd been recording the entire conversation. That's why he spent 2 years documenting everything you did. That's why he created Phoenix Protocol. And that's why he made sure Marcus Rivera had the activation codes. Charles's face went white as he realized his mistake. You see, Charles, while you were busy suspecting Marcus, you forgot to suspect me. You forgot that I'm James Chen's daughter, and that I inherited more than just his company. Elena pressed a button on her phone, and every screen in the Nextech building simultaneously displayed the same message. Phoenix Protocol activated. Uploading evidence to WikiLeaks, FBI, and international media. The boardroom erupted in chaos as members realized they were witnessing the destruction of the company they'd helped build. But Elena's attention was focused on Charles, who was reaching for something inside his jacket. Elena, you have no idea what you've done, he said, his hand closing around what looked like a small pistol. The people I work with don't tolerate betrayal. Neither do I, Elena replied, and pressed another button on her phone. The conference room doors burst open as FBI agents flooded in, led by Agent Kim with her weapon drawn. "Charles Chen," Agent Kim announced, "you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, money laundering, and violations of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act." Charles looked around the room desperately, but found himself surrounded by federal agents. His hand slowly moved away from his jacket as he realized that resistance was futile. "Elena," he said as agents moved to handcuff him, "you have no idea what you've inherited. Nextech wasn't just my project. It was part of something much larger. Something that will destroy you for what you've done today. Then I'll face that when it comes," Elena replied. "But I won't let Dad's death be meaningless." As federal agents led Charles away, Elena found herself alone in the boardroom with Agent Kim and the 11 board members who would spend the next several hours being interviewed by FBI investigators. "Ms. Chen," Agent Kim said, "I need you to know that Marcus Rivera is safe. We extracted him from the building during the lockdown. His evidence, combined with what you've provided, should be sufficient to prosecute not just your uncle, but his entire network." Elena nodded, feeling emotionally exhausted but strangely peaceful. "What happens to Nextech now? That depends on you. The company will face massive fines and oversight, but the core technology can survive under new leadership. Your cooperation has earned you immunity from prosecution. And the victims? The people who were hurt because of what we built?" Agent Kim's expression softened slightly. "There will be a victim compensation fund, and Nextech's technology will be audited and reformed to prevent future abuses. It's not perfect justice, but it's a start." As FBI agents continued their work throughout the building, Elena made her way to the executive parking garage, where she found Marcus waiting beside his car. His face showed the exhaustion of someone who'd spent months living a lie, but his eyes held satisfaction. "It's over," he said simply. "Is it?" Elena asked. Charles said Nextech was part of something larger, that there would be consequences for what we did today. There probably will be, but Isabella is safe now. She can return to journalism without fear of being tracked through our systems. And thousands of activists and dissidents will be harder to find because Nextech's surveillance tools are being dismantled. Elena looked back at the building that had been her father's dream and her inheritance. "I still can't believe Charles killed him. His own brother. Power corrupts, Elena. But your father never stopped fighting against that corruption, even when it cost him everything. What about us?" Elena asked quietly. "When this is all over, when the investigations are complete and the trials are finished, what happens to us?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and Elena could see him weighing the question carefully. "I don't know," he said finally. "I've been Marcus Rivera pretending to be Miguel Santos for so long that I'm not sure who I really am anymore. And you've inherited a company that will need complete restructuring, assuming it survives at all. But I'd like to find out. If you're willing." Elena looked at this man who'd risked everything to expose the truth, who'd helped her honor her father's memory while saving countless lives, who'd shown her that love could grow even in the shadow of deception. "I'm willing," she said. "But first, I have something to do." "What's that?" Elena pulled out her phone and composed a message to every Nextech employee worldwide. "Today, Nextech Industries begins a new chapter. We have discovered that our technology has been misused to harm innocent people, and we are taking immediate action to ensure that never happens again. Our company will be restructured to serve users' interests rather than exploit them. This process will be difficult and costly, but it's the right thing to do. Some of you may choose to leave during this transition, and I understand that choice. For those who stay, we will build something worthy of the dreams that created Silicon Valley. Technology that serves humanity rather than oppresses it. This is what my father, James Chen, would have wanted. This is what Nextech will become." "Elena Chen, CEO," she sent the message, and looked at Marcus. "Ready to help me rebuild my father's company?" "Ready," he said, and for the first time since she'd known him, his smile was completely real. As they drove out of the Nextech parking garage together, Elena realized that justice wasn't just about punishing the guilty, it was about honoring the innocent by ensuring their sacrifices led to something better. Her father was gone, but his dream of democratizing technology would finally become reality. And sometimes that was the most meaningful victory of all. 6 months later, Elena stood in the same boardroom where Charles had confessed to murder, but everything else had changed. The mahogany table had been replaced with a simple glass surface. The corporate portraits had been removed in favor of photos from refugee camps and schools where reformed Nextech technology was helping rather than harming vulnerable populations. Marcus sat across from her, no longer pretending to be anyone other than himself. Between them lay contracts establishing the Elena Chen Foundation for Digital Rights, a non-profit organization that would oversee Nextech's transition to ethical technology development. The Myanmar government has agreed to delete all data obtained through Nextech surveillance, Marcus reported. Isabella will be returning to Bogota next month to resume her journalism career, and the congressional hearings, scheduled for next spring. But with Charles's cooperation and all the evidence we've provided, most of the other companies in his network are already negotiating plea agreements. Elena nodded, still amazed by how much had changed since that morning when FBI agent Kim had walked into their lives. Nextech had survived, but barely. They'd paid nearly $10 billion in fines and victim compensation. Half their government contracts had been canceled. Their stock price had crashed and recovered only partially, but they'd also pioneered new privacy protection algorithms, created transparent user data controls, and become the first major tech company to submit to permanent third-party oversight of their AI systems. Any regrets? Marcus asked. Elena looked out the window at Silicon Valley, where hundreds of other companies were grappling with their own ethical challenges in the wake of Nextech's transformation. About exposing Charles, about destroying Dad's empire to honor his memory, about trusting a man who lied to me about everything except the things that mattered most, about any of it. Elena reached across the table and took Marcus's hand, feeling calluses that had once seemed mysterious but now felt familiar and reassuring. No regrets, she said. Only hope for what we're building next. As the sun set over Silicon Valley, Elena Chen and Marcus Rivera began planning their next project, not just rebuilding a company, but proving that technology could serve justice instead of undermining it. But their moment of quiet satisfaction was interrupted by Elena's secure phone buzzing with an encrypted message from an unknown number. Charles Chen was just the beginning. You have 72 hours to restore the Myanmar data streams, or Isabella Rivera dies. Choose wisely. The syndicate. Elena's blood turned to ice as she showed the message to Marcus. His face went pale as he read the threat against his sister. Isabella is supposed to be in protective custody, he said, immediately pulling out his own encrypted device to contact his FBI handlers. Agent Kim, he said when the call connected, we have a problem. Someone calling themselves the Syndicate claims to have Isabella and is demanding we restore data access to Myanmar. Elena watched Marcus's expression grow increasingly grim as he listened to Agent Kim's response. What is it? She asked when he hung up. Isabella never made it to the safe house. She disappeared 3 hours ago from a coffee shop in Georgetown. No signs of struggle, no witnesses, but her phone and laptop were left behind. Elena felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. By exposing Charles and dismantling Nextech's surveillance network, she had apparently triggered retaliation from forces even more dangerous than her uncle. Who is the Syndicate? She asked. If I had to guess, it's the international network that Charles was working with. The people who actually profited from the data sales, who used our technology to oppress dissidents worldwide. Marcus began pacing, his tactical mind working through scenarios. They've lost billions in revenue because of what we did. Isabella is leveraged to force us to restore their access. Can we track the message? Already tried. It's bouncing through multiple servers across different continents. Whoever sent it knows how to stay hidden. Elena stared out at the lights of Silicon Valley, thinking about how many other tech companies might be facing similar pressures from shadow organizations that profited from surveillance and oppression. Marcus, she said quietly, what if we give them what they want? He stopped pacing and stared at her. Elena, we can't. Restoring that data access would put thousands of people at risk. No, listen. What if we give them what they think they want, but not what they actually need? Marcus's eyes narrowed as he began to understand her thinking. You're talking about a trap. I'm talking about using my father's final gift. Elena pulled out her laptop and began typing rapidly. Phoenix Protocol wasn't just about exposing NextX crimes. They've built it with defensive capabilities too. Ways to trace data requests, identify bad actors, and feed false information to hostile users. That's incredibly dangerous, Elena. If they realize what we're doing, then we better make sure they don't realize until it's too late. Elena's fingers flew across the keyboard, accessing systems she'd inherited but never fully understood until now. Dad spent 2 years preparing for exactly this scenario: retaliation from the people who profit from surveillance technology. Marcus watched her work, seeing echoes of James Chen's brilliant tactical mind in his daughter's approach to the problem. "What do you need from me?" he asked. "I need you to contact every investigative journalist, human rights organization, and government agency that might be interested in exposing an international surveillance syndicate." Elena paused in her typing to meet his eyes. "Because in 72 hours, we're going to give them the biggest intelligence coup in history. And Isabella, we're going to save her too. But first, we need to make the syndicate believe they've won." Over the next 24 hours, Elena and Marcus worked with a small team of FBI cybersecurity specialists to prepare what appeared to be a complete restoration of NextX surveillance capabilities. In reality, they were creating an elaborate digital trap that would trace every access request back to its source while feeding carefully crafted disinformation to the syndicate's operations. "The beauty of Dad's system," Elena explained to Agent Kim during one of their planning sessions, "is that it gives bad actors exactly what they think they want while documenting everything they do with it. And if they realize it's a trap before we can trace them, then Isabella dies and we're back where we started. But if we do nothing, she dies anyway, and the syndicate continues operating with impunity." Agent Kim nodded grimly. "We've positioned response teams in 12 countries based on our best guesses about syndicate locations. When you spring the trap, we'll be ready to move simultaneously." On the evening of the second day, Elena received another encrypted message. "Data restoration confirmed. Your compliance is noted. Isabella Rivera will be released when Myanmar operations resume normal parameters." Elena showed the message to Marcus, who was monitoring the carefully constructed data feeds they'd established. "They're taking the bait," he said, pointing to his screens. "Look at this. Data requests from government agencies in Myanmar, Belarus, Saudi Arabia, and 6 other countries, all going through the false channels we created. Are we getting location data? Better than that, we're getting organizational structure, communication patterns, financial flows, everything the FBI needs to roll up the entire network." Elena watched the data streams flowing across their monitors, each request revealing another piece of the syndicate's operations. It was like watching a cancer expose itself while seeking nourishment. "There," Marcus said suddenly, pointing to a data request that stood out from the others. "That's not from a government agency. It's from a private facility in Romania. That's where they're holding Isabella." Elena immediately called Agent Kim. "We have a location. Are your teams ready? Standing by. Initiate the trap sequence." Elena took a deep breath and activated the final phase of Phoenix Protocol. Across 12 countries, FBI teams and international law enforcement agencies began simultaneous raids on syndicate facilities, guided by the real-time intelligence flowing through NextX compromised systems. But in Romania, the operation encountered unexpected resistance. "We've got a problem," Agent Kim reported over the secure channel. "The facility is heavily defended, and they've threatened to kill Isabella if we attempt entry." Elena felt her chest tighten with fear and responsibility. "What are our options? We can try a tactical assault, but the risk to the hostage is significant. Or what? Or you can offer them something they want more than revenge." Elena looked at Marcus, who nodded with grim understanding. "They want me," Elena said, "the CEO who destroyed their network. They want to make an example." "Elena, no," Marcus said immediately. "We'll find another way. There is no other way. Isabella is in danger because of choices I made. This is my responsibility." Agent Kim's voice was careful. "Ms. Chen, if you're serious about this, we can provide protection, but the risk, I understand the risk, But I also understand that some fights are worth the danger. 2 hours later, Elena stood in the parking garage of an abandoned warehouse outside Bucharest, Romania, surrounded by FBI tactical teams positioned at carefully calculated distances. In her hand, she held a tablet containing what appeared to be the master codes for NextX's entire surveillance network. The syndicate representatives who emerged from the shadows were not what she'd expected. Instead of the stereotypical international criminals she'd imagined, they looked like corporate executives, well-dressed, professional, speaking with the calm authority of people accustomed to purchasing governments and eliminating obstacles. "Ms. Chen," said their apparent leader, a woman in her 50s with silver hair and cold eyes, "you've caused us considerable inconvenience." "I've cost you money," Elena replied. "There's a difference, indeed. Money that funded operations protecting global stability. Your naive idealism has already resulted in political chaos in 3 countries where surveillance capabilities were suddenly curtailed." Elena felt a chill as she realized the syndicate genuinely believed they were serving a greater good by enabling authoritarian surveillance. "Where is Isabella Rivera?" The woman gestured, and 2 men brought Isabella forward. Marcus's sister looked exhausted but unharmed, her eyes showing the defiant spirit that had made her one of South America's most respected investigative journalists. "She's alive, as promised. Now, the master codes." Elena held up the tablet. "These codes will give you administrative access to every NextX system, every user database, every surveillance algorithm we've developed. You'll be able to restore full operations and expand beyond what Charles Chen ever provided." "Excellent. And in return, you and Ms. Rivera walk away from this encounter." A fair exchange. Elena looked at Isabella, then at the tablet in her hand that supposedly contained the keys to global digital oppression. "There's just one thing you should know about these codes," she said calmly. "What's that?" "They're not master codes for NextX surveillance systems." Elena smiled for the first time since arriving in Romania. "They're activation codes for a virus my father designed to destroy any network that tries to use them." The syndicate leader's composed expression faltered. "That's impossible. Our technical analysis confirmed." "Your technical analysis confirmed that the codes would interface with NextX systems. It didn't confirm what would happen after that interface was established." As if summoned by her words, the tactical teams positioned around the warehouse began moving into position. The syndicate representatives reached for weapons, but found themselves surrounded by FBI agents and Romanian special forces. "Ms. Chen," the syndicate leader said with cold fury, "you have no idea what you've unleashed. We are not the only organization profiting from surveillance technology. There are others, worse than us, who will not be as civilized in their retaliation. Then I guess I'll have to stop them too," Elena replied. As law enforcement took the syndicate members into custody, Elena rushed to Isabella Rivera, helping Marcus embrace his sister after months of separation and fear. "Thank you," Isabella said quietly. "Marcus told me what you sacrificed to expose the truth about surveillance technology." "I didn't sacrifice anything," Elena replied. "I finally started living up to my father's example." 6 weeks later, Elena sat in a congressional hearing room in Washington, D.C., facing a panel of senators investigating the global surveillance industry. Beside her sat Marcus, now officially serving as NextX's Director of Ethical Technology Development. "Ms. Chen," said Senator Patricia Williams, "your testimony has revealed the existence of a vast international network profiting from surveillance technology developed by American companies. What steps are you taking to ensure this never happens again?" "Senator, NextX has implemented the most comprehensive ethical oversight system in the technology industry. Every algorithm we develop is reviewed by independent human rights organizations. Every government contract is publicly disclosed. Every user interaction is protected by privacy protocols that even we cannot override. And the financial cost of these measures? Elena looked at Marcus, then back at the senators. In the last quarter, Nextech's profits fell by 60%. We've lost several major contracts with governments that refused to accept our new transparency requirements. Our stock price remains volatile as investors question whether ethical technology can be profitable technology. Do you regret these changes? Elena thought about her father, about Charles Chen sitting in federal prison, about Isabella Rivera returning to journalism without fear of surveillance retaliation. Senator, 6 months ago, my company's technology was used to identify and arrest pro-democracy activists in Myanmar. Today, that same technology is being used to locate missing children and identify human trafficking networks. The difference isn't in the technology, it's in the values that guide how it's used. And your message to other technology companies facing similar ethical challenges? Elena leaned toward the microphone, thinking about the hundreds of tech executives watching this hearing, weighing profit against principle. Technology is not neutral. Every algorithm, every database, every user interface embodies the values of the people who create it. We can build systems that empower people or oppress them, that protect privacy or violate it, that serve democracy or undermine it. The choice is ours, and the responsibility is ours. As the hearing concluded, Elena and Marcus walked out of the Capitol building together into bright Washington sunlight that seemed to promise better days ahead. Any regrets about giving up the surveillance business? Marcus asked. Elena looked at him. This man who'd risked everything to expose the truth, who'd helped her honor her father's memory while building something worthy of his dreams. Only one, she said. What's that? I regret that it took me so long to understand what my father was really trying to tell me. Which was? Elena smiled, feeling James Chen's presence in the warm sunlight and the promise of ethical technology serving humanity instead of oppressing it. That the most important code you can write is the moral code that guides every other decision you make. As they walked toward a future where technology served justice instead of undermining it, Elena Chen and Marcus Rivera carried forward a legacy that proved the most powerful revolution begins not with destruction, but with the courage to build something better.